here to the home of the Sports Champion and Ferrari's biggest fan, as we are giving you the latest race reaction from round 19 of the 2025 Formula One World Championship, from the Grand Prix of the United States, obviously run on the circuit of the Americas. And I have to say, this has really, turned the title battle, especially in the Drivers' Championship, upside down. It's also finally, resulted in what I would call probably the best performance of the season, and we will tell you everything about it in this exclusive race reaction, obviously published exact 24 hours after the start of this amazing race. So, I think we were just a whisker away, from a victory, and I was really pleased to finally see us, the Scarlet Cars, deliver the performance that we should. In fact, if you've seen the last year's race and you would go then all the way, for example, and come back this year, you will think that not much has changed. That you would probably think, hey, actually we are still as competitive, and fighting for the championships. Just like we were, for example, last year, because the performance was that good, and I believe the strategy was the absolute key to it. So maybe what a pity that we split the strategy, because it meant that one driver definitely 100% had a winning strategy, whereas the other one, obviously, in this case Lewis Hamilton, ran the same strategy as the other guys, which proved to be perhaps not the best one, but still I was very happy here with the performance. So as after the sprint, when we finished 4th and 5th, we definitely wanted to get on the podium, especially last time we've gotten on the podium was during the Belgium Grand Prix. So after the summer break, which especially the Ferrari's leadership touted as this time that we were gonna be fighting for the world titles, that hasn't quite materials, has it, right? So we were definitely a little bit concerned about it. But I have to say, once we, figure out everything, with regards to the setup, so basically going for more wing, which was very clear after the sprint qualifying, we really managed to deliver a fantastic performance. And, the qualifying was very smooth, right? So once, we very quickly, because of that carnage, in the sprint, once we were able to finish 4th and 5th, and especially once, we were able in the qualifying, to be consistently, setting the lap times easily, in the top 3, top 5, top 6, and not having to worry about, for example, using the extra set of tires just to get, into the next session, which is absolutely critical when you have the sprint Grand Prix weekend. Because if, for example, you always have to do that, right, you are then always running, for example, the scrap tires, then you have to, put in a new fresh set of tires. But I saw, especially Hamilton being very strong, but also Leclerc, being improved with more downforce, as obviously, he can really push that Scarlet beautiful car, to the limit. What we've seen is that, yes, we were always, able to qualify easily out of the Q1, out of the Q2, and, in the qualifying 3, it went actually pretty well, right? So, we were absolutely, over the moon, when Leclerc put it, on the front row. But we were a bit concerned, obviously, about the pace of the Red Bulls. That is the biggest revelation. On this Scuderia Red Retina IMEC, we will also show you, especially the current driver standings, the constructor standings. Now is the fight for the second place, but we are 100% in it, and it's looking really beautiful. So, what can we tell you, about the race? First up, he put in such a good lap that even though, just like what happened to his teammate Tsunoda, who went absolutely crazy after sprint qualifying 1, when he missed, the opportunity to get a final time lap, when obviously first up, and also there was few seconds short, he didn't actually need to do it, right? Because he was 3/10 up. And, Norris, who is just beat Leclerc by a few hundredths of a second, you were expecting, like, okay, will McLaren unleash that pace, go, 3, 4, 5 tenths, quicker, punish this silly mistake, by the Red Bull sending Verstappen out much too late? No, that hasn't happened. Basically hardly anybody could improve. That could have been down to the fact that the qualifying was actually run quite late, in a day, and especially once you don't have so many cars on the track. Usually what happens is that the track is not as rubbered in, and the lap times were actually slower than, for example, what I did when I planted in on pole position, right? Absolutely, yes. So yeah, over here, I have to say, what basically, happened was that, at that particular time, nobody was, able to really improve. So we were to start third and fifth. And, I felt, these were good positions. And then the master stroke was to put Leclerc on the soft tires, right? So everybody else had the mediums. Couple of guys had the hard tires, but you should know that there are 6 compounds, and then, of course, the hard tires would actually be the hardest compound, the C1. The mediums were C3, C4 was the soft. So there was no C2, that second hardest compound. So as a result, when some guys like Albon, for example, put it in, you could see him, unable to stop the car, obviously the grip not being there, despite the very high ambient temperatures and the track temperatures. So the hard tire simply didn't work. But the soft tire, we were able, especially with Leclerc, to keep it for over 20 laps. And that was absolutely the key. And the key was the start. I believe, that qualifying third and fifth, we could have definitely won the race, right? Usually the qualifying was the Achilles tendon of our season. And that's actually why we were not able maybe to get lots of the results that we really deserved. Why? Formula 1 2025 is pretty much a qualifying season. It reminds me a little bit of the 2010 to 2010 season, which obviously lots of, when you were watching it, there are not so many overtakes, right? But in the end, it produced a magnificent finale in Abu Dhabi, and maybe this is what's going to happen, again this year, especially, the way the championship, the Drivers' Championship, even the Constructors' Championship is going. So, because he was the only one starting on a soft tire, got a pretty good start, right? Verstappen obviously always being concerned with Norris. That was great news for us because he was a bit out of shape, which opened up the outside line. And Lewis Hamilton, you probably noticed that he didn't have such a great start. But again, the outside line was wide open. He followed Leclerc on his fresh mediums, and Leclerc easily has gotten past Norris. And then I think the key was either to attack Verstappen into the assist, but that could have ended in a nasty crash, but why not? We don't want Verstappen to equal Michael Schumacher's record. And if there was a crash, if, for example, Norris would get, in a kerfuffle with that could have been the first Lewis Hamilton victory. Or what Leclerc could have done was just, lift off the throttle a little bit, like you can see me doing great times, many times, for example, in the races. Sometimes you have to understand you just too fast, right? And this is exactly what happened. So Leclerc was coming up a bit too fast at the Red Bull, and because he lifted, he easily lost half a second, and then he was never able, to stay within that 1 second of the DRS zone. Now DRS obviously opens up after the opening lap, and so Verstappen always, had that buffer, so he never had to defend, for example, from us or from anybody else for that matter. And I believe, it was really coming into the assist. Leclerc was so close, to Verstappen, he either should have challenged him there, or once he was getting past the Norris, perhaps lift up a little bit of here, a little bit of there, a couple of little lifts, would enable him, to follow Verstappen and, for example, fight with him at the end of the main straight, then manage to have the DRS obviously for, that back straight. For the second lap, and then probably if we have gotten ahead of him, I don't believe, according to how difficult it was for Norris to fight with us, I believe we would have been in for a victory, because our strategy, we were able to make up about 5 or 6 seconds, if you consider when we stopped, for example, where Red Bull was in the end, and also compared to Norris. As it was Charles against Lando, so to speak, and the Lewis against Oscar, sort of the other McLaren against Ferrari. The orange against the red has never materialized, right? Very funny that obviously last season we were fighting, with the orange cars. This is how it should have been from the beginning of the season. Piastri was out of it, distant fifth. Hamilton did a great job, was actually following Norris, but sadly never really, went for it. I believe, overheating could have played a little bit of the part. And, once you drop back 2 or 3 seconds, it's really difficult to claw it back. So basically, when you have the opportunity, you gotta follow the car and you gotta go for it. Leclerc did a fantastic job, defending. I mean, that was a masterclass of defending, just the way that, he was, able to, defend, from Norris, who obviously was probably the favorite to win the race. How he managed to keep him behind for over 20 laps, on the soft tires, that after 10 laps, lost its luster. That was a champion-like performance. However, it also enabled Verstappen to build up almost a 10-second lead, right? And that was the key really to his victory, which is really unfortunate. We don't want the Red Bull to win. It's great for the championship and for a spectacle, but here we are, helping one of our rivals. And yeah, it was kind of a bittersweet moment. On one hand, you go like, okay, look, we either should stop fighting. One of them should go against Verstappen, be it Charles or even the orange cars. Obviously, I believe that Charles, if he didn't have to fight with Norris, and he managed to stay within 3 or 5 seconds of Verstappen, then I think he would definitely have been able, to mount the challenge, because when he stopped after Hamilton and lap 22 was obviously already attacking him, when the soft tires had enough with that heavy fueled load, the heavily fueled car, the Scarlet Ferrari, from the beginning of the race. What happened was that obviously Charles peeled into the pits, but once he put on the mediums, he did a great job to kind of ease into them, to manage the tires. And that was the key, because all the other drivers knew, look, we cannot go onto the hard tire, so they tried to extend the stint and then go on the soft. But obviously for the soft they also had to do over 20 laps, so you could see they didn't have much of a performance. And actually Leclerc then on the mediums was quicker, and as a result we were able to recover the position from Norris, which was great. But actually we also recovered quite a lot of ground to Verstappen. It was great to see. Verstappen came out and Leclerc was less around 5.1 second, behind, which was absolutely fantastic. This was great. And just imagine if we stayed within 3 or 5 seconds, we would have stopped. Red Bull probably wouldn't have thought much of it, but yeah, we would be able, to get them, especially the way Leclerc overtook some of the slower cars, didn't waste any time with them. That's also very, very critical, right? Because it's still difficult to overtake. And, great performance by him. I believe with Hamilton being on the same strategy like everybody else, he just dropped back a little bit. But imagine, especially if it was Hamilton, because this is one of his favorite tracks, and he was definitely on the pace. If he also had the soft tires, or if he had the soft tires, Leclerc had the mediums, that could have been some performance. And I believe this is exactly what it should be. With the better luck, we could have been even higher up the grid. I do believe, beating that Verstappen's lap was possible, especially if he didn't get the final run. But, yeah, it was definitely there, but I believe, it was really in the first half of the lap, where Leclerc made a great choice at the beginning of it, just going into the assist. Shouldn't have, kind of yield to Verstappen, because when he did, he lost too much time that he was never able to recover. And obviously, fighting out with Norris, maybe what Hamilton, I believe, could have done was, to also put Norris under pressure. That would free up Leclerc, because, we definitely, if we would have qualified on pole, I do believe we would have won here at the Circuit of the Americas for the second year running. And yeah, great result, overall. I think you also greatly enjoyed, and this is how it should be, right? In the end, of course, what happened was that with 5-6 laps to go, Norris tried something else, was a bit more aggressive, and yeah, in the end, he was able to get Leclerc, like he was able to get him before the pit stop. But overall, it would have been different. I believe if we would be fighting for the victory. And very, very encouraging performance going to Mexico. I believe Lewis Hamilton deserves that first Ferrari podium. Of course, probably heard of that record of the most races with Scuderia Ferrari, 19 without a podium finish. That's definitely gonna change. And maybe he will slowly, get into it and then perform really well, because he was very close to Charles. And kudos to him for holding up Piastri, right? That just shows, and that fact that Piastri, the championship leader, only finished 5th and lost another 15 points to Verstappen, has blown the championship wide open. And it will be very interesting. As we see on the calendar, we have 7 more racing sessions, 5 more Grand Prix, 2 more sprints. Again, there are lots of points on offer, with Verstappen obviously winning 6 times more sprints than any other driver in the history. You wouldn't bet on him, doing pretty well. But this is a huge surprise, actually, that Red Bull is that competitive. But for us, hopefully we will be able to end the season on a high. We definitely gotta go for a win. But especially over here, we almost overtook Mercedes back for the 2nd place, and I believe it's gonna be happening after Mexico. So now, let me turn around the Scuderia Red Retina iMac, and let's take a look over here, and how the championship obviously looks like over here, right? So as we can see over here, Okay, I'm sure you can see it nice and clear. Verstappen winning the race from Lando Norris, who eventually finished, 8 seconds behind him, but he was over 10 seconds back. So also Verstappen was sliding on the softs. He was not competitive. That's not usually the strategy they run. So we definitely, had a chance to bring the fight back to them. I believe both Leclerc and Hamilton slowed down significantly towards the end of the race, might have been a bit underfueled in order to just make sure that, we get across the finishing line. Actually, for Hamilton, he thought that he had the slow puncture because he struggled, to slow down the car going into turn 11, I believe, at the end of the long straight. But thankfully, that wasn't the case, and he kept Piastri behind by about 1.1 second. Sixth, then George Russell, the hero from the sprint, and like he said it, this is definitely a qualifying formula. Like once you're behind in 2025, you can see even somebody like Russell, who was able to keep up with Verstappen and finish half a minute behind him. 7, Yuki Tsunoda had quite an adventurous race, but obviously made it there 5 seconds ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, who made up kind of, for what happened at the start of the sprint race, where he was a kind of innocent passenger ran into by the raging championship leader. 9, Oliver Behrman, showing up really well of late, scoring points for Haas, on their home Grand Prix, and Fernando Alonso scoring a point by being over 1 minute behind. So over here, let's take a look at the 2025 Formula 1 Drivers' Championship. It's really heating up, so this sprint race, has really thrown up some surprises. We now have 3 drivers who have scored at least 300 points. Oscar Piastri is still maintaining the lead with 346 points, but he will be gunning for his first victory since the Netherlands when we get to the Mexico and the high altitude, which we will see. It's kind of unknown which team will come out on top. Lando Norris, 332 points. He's 14 points behind. Very, very close. He can retake the lead. Max Verstappen, the reigning world champion, now going for that 5th title, which would equal Michael Schumacher. I really don't want to see that 306 points. It's funny that in 2021, we were supporting, Verstappen to stop Hamilton from winning the 8th title, but now it created this kind of a new problem, and now he's gunning for 5th in a row. He's 40 points behind. Look, I managed to overtake this gap if you watch my 2016 championship, but it is challenging because you always, every race you gotta be winning, right? If for example in Mexico or Brazil, or for example if let's say we get to Las Vegas or elsewhere, if you just have one bad race, right, and the others suddenly pick up the points, it can easily go to you being 60 points behind with 4 races to go, and you suddenly have very slim chance of winning the title, right? So we will see what happens. Obviously, he made up over 40 points, in just the last 5 races. So the next 5 races, he could definitely overtake them. I believe the critical point will be where everybody is after Las Vegas, right? The Brazilian sprint has lots of points for Mexico, obviously, being high altitude. Las Vegas, street track. Hopefully, all of these tracks will fit us as well. We could definitely be going on for a victory. So it will be very important to see, if the Red Bull can actually maintain the slight, I would say, car advantage that now they have over McLaren's. If yes, if there are no retirements for Verstappen, if he can, keep on finishing on a podium ahead of them, that's gonna be some title fight. But I actually think that it's more likely that he will crash with somebody like Russell or, one of the McLarens, and the title fight will end before we get back to the North America in Las Vegas. We will see. For George Russell, Mercedes, he definitely, I think, lost the chance now to fight Verstappen for the 3rd place. He's on 252 points. Charles Leclerc is lurking, getting into 200 points almost for Scuderia Ferrari, 192 points. 6, Lewis Hamilton, Ferrari, 50 points behind, 142 points. It's funny that Hamilton is more points behind and Verstappen is behind Piastri, but I think 5th and 6th, there's not much we can do, but now the goal should be to get as many trophies as possible, which will then enable us to finish 2nd once again in the Constructors' Championship. 7, Andrea Kimi Antonelli Mercedes, 89 points. 8 is then Alexander Albon Williams, 73 points. Another bad race for him, kind of off form of late. 9 is now Nico Hülkenberg, made it back for Kick Sauber, 41 points, a very important result. 10, Isaac Hajar Racing Bulls 39 points. 11 is then Carlos Sainz Williams 38 points. He was on for a really good performance, you know, but always overtaking like where I also like to overtake in that triple apex before that, you know, reverse turn 8 from the Turkey, right? You know, that the three corners, that the Kota of the Americas, you know, the circuit of the Americas is designed in this way, right? To mimic some of the most amazing circuits on the Formula 1 calendar. Sainz did some great overtakes there, but yeah, obviously, you know, with Antonelli, he misjudged it, and he will get, I believe, a great penalty for Mexico. Then we have 12, Fernando Alonso, Aston Martin, 37 points. 13, Lance Stroll, Aston Martin, 32 points. Funnily enough, you know, Stroll was actually running very close to Alonso by the end of the race. So, yeah, I wonder how that happened. 14, Liam Lawson Racing Bulls, 30 points. 15 is then Esteban Ocon Haas, 28 points. 16, Yuki Tsunoda, Red Bull Racing, 28 points. He's gotten some results, you know, but still, again, you know, finishing almost 50 seconds behind his teammate, who's now maybe back in the fight for a championship, you know. Yeah, what to say about Tsunoda, right? And of course, 17, we then have Pierre Gasly, Alpine, 20 points. 18, Oliver Behrman has 20 points. And now 19, Gabriel Bortoleto, the reigning F2 champion for Kicksauber, on 18 points. 20th, Franco Colapinto, Alpine, saying no to the team. I will overtake Gasly to show that even though I have 0 points, I belong to F1. That, you know, I believe they will celebrate in Brazil when all the Argentina will go to the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache. And 21st, Jack Doohan, Alpine, who of course didn't compete, on 21 points. So let's take a look at our constructor standings. So McLaren leading with 678 points, being champions. But will they have a driver champion? Well, what we hope is going to happen is that second place Mercedes, 341 points, will lose that place to Scuderia Ferrari, 334 points, you know, 10 stars. 3 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. You know, I believe after Mexico, you know, if we keep up this form, we will be back where we belong, and then we have to just consolidate it and finish the season on a high. 4th, Red Bull Racing, 331 points. I can't believe they are just 3 points behind us. 5th, Williams on nice 111 points. 6th is Racing Bull, 72 points. 7, Aston Martin, 69 points. 8, Kicksauber, 59 points. And 9, Haas, 48 points. And 10, Alpine, 20 points. So this is, you know, how it looks like. So a very positive weekend after a really terrible start. You can see in the Drivers' Championship that was constructors. This is how the Drivers' Championship is looking like. And of course, yeah, here you have the winner. And you know, what a great job by Antonelli, who obviously, you know, my mom and my sister especially support him because they think he's cute. Not sure about that. You know, great thing that he's gotten the fastest lap. Otherwise, Verstappen would have gotten that Grand Slam, but also for the sprint and the Grand Prix that nobody has, you know, ever managed to do before. Nobody. It's not the undisputed champion, 4-time Formula 1 World Champion. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So you guys, you know, I'm celebrating over here. You know, great result. You know, considering where the season is going. But I hope you enjoyed. Also, you know, second place. But hey, you know, we wrapped up the championship, and you know, I have to say, you know, I'm so glad, you know, to have won the 4th driver's title for Scuderia Ferrari. We are gunning for that 5th constructors title as well. You know, I hope you are, you know, enjoying that season that we are running concurrently. You know, we also haven't won because we were running it unlike in a brilliant sunshine, unlike the Formula 1 cars, obviously in the rainy weather. But yeah, you know, I'm yeah, over the moon. You know, it was a little bit bittersweet that we didn't celebrate, you know, the title obviously with a victory. But I hope we can also set some records, because you know, the Grand Slams, what Verstappen didn't achieve over here, or the Sprint Grand Slam, is what I'm also you know, really good at. And it's so much fun. You know, we really love Formula 1, especially when there is a close racing and a lot to play for. And I hope you guys enjoyed, especially the special celebration with the Formula 1 World Championship trophy, which we will also show it to you here when the Drivers' Champion will be decided. We obviously don't have the constructors, you know, the sort of trophy. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it over here. This was the exclusive race reaction from round 19 of the championship, you know, where I'm running the concurrent this season. You know, I'm just over the moon that I managed to win, you know, the championship, but it was a long time coming, you know, and we will see, you know, who will clinch the real 2025 Formula 1 World Championship. Let me know, for example, in the comments below and so on. What do you think? I wouldn't necessarily mind if somebody in the orange wins it, but yeah, I wish it was somebody in the red, because clearly both drivers have the hunger, they want to win, and there's nothing better than winning the Formula 1 driver's title for Scuderia Ferrari. So you guys, hope you enjoyed over here with our home sweet home setup with this SF1000T818 Formula 1 Racing Simulator, as we finally chasing that elusive Formula 1 Grand Prix victory with the golden shiny trophies and the golden shiny medals. Wish us a good luck. The next race is less than 7 days away. All I can say is, Forza Ferrari! Let's go! Let's keep up the momentum! Let's not just be collecting the small trophies. Let's go for the Grand Prix!